Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I started counting days on the back wall with a pencil I kept in a Ziploc bag, because wet pencils are just wood and clay will smear when humidity pushes up from the forest floor. By my marks, today is day 49. I am a wildlife technician assigned to a seasonal fire watch in the Allegheny National Forest, a patchwork of mixed hardwood and pine that runs between the towns of Warren, Marionville, Kane, and the state line toward New York. My tower sits on a low ridge north of the Allegheny Reservoir. The cab is a small square room bolted to a steel frame, with glass on all sides and a metal catwalk that gives you a view beyond what the binoculars already offer. The ladder is the only way up, one straight length of welded steel, 60 feet from the leaf litter to the trapdoor under my floor. From here, I can see the shadow of Kinzua Dam on clear mornings, and at night I can sometimes pick out the red beacons on the hilltop radio mast near Warren. Lately, nights have been quiet enough that when wind drops I can hear the reservoir slapping rock like a distant flag. I didn't hear sirens when it started. I heard radio voices first, the kind you pick up by accident when you're swinging past channels while you wait for wind to fall within the safe range for a controlled burn. At first, it sounded like the usual. An ambulance on a county road, a call for a volunteer crew to meet at the township building. Then it pulled wider. State police units relaying road closures. A Department of Transportation operator warning of a tangle of stopped traffic near an interchange. Someone from a hospital talking quickly on a frequency I wasn't supposed to be able to hear. The repeaters carried it farther than they should have. The voices got closer and faster and then went irregular, like breath that can't settle. And then one morning, the morning the air smelled like wet leaves and diesel drifting up from a pipeline right of way, I realized no one had keyed a mic in hours. The silence after that felt like it had weight. I wrote a checklist on day 2 because checklists are how you keep a mind steady when other things aren't. Wake at 6 a.m. Check perimeter through binoculars. Boil water on the small propane stove. Log weather. Check battery voltage on the panel controller. Top off hand washing jug. Scan VHF frequencies for human voices. It is an ordinary list built of ordinary tasks, and it is the only reason I can sit down at this little desk and write what I have seen without my thoughts dissolving like mist over the hemlock. The tower cabin is not big. 8 feet by 8 feet, maybe 10. A plywood floor, a central stand for the sighting compass used to plot smoke columns, plywood cabinets screwed into angle iron, a folding cot I scavenged from the ranger station down the road, and a metal footlocker where I keep the valuable things. My handheld radio, the spare batteries in their vacuum bag, a first aid kit, a laminated topographic map with grease pencil marks, 2 headlamps, a signal mirror, the small field knife my dad gave me, and a small pouch where I keep a flash drive that has a copy of my notes and a cheap family photo I printed from my phone when it still had service. I am not a survival expert. I'm a field worker who knows birds by their calls and trees by their bark, who can tell you which scat belongs to a coyote and which belongs to a black bear, who knows how to climb a tower safely, and who knows that cans of peaches are cheap calories with syrup that you should drink even if it feels too sweet. The supply I brought for 6 weeks is wearing thin. I estimate 3 weeks left if I keep my meals small. On day 9, I stopped calling them anything that would sound like a clinical term. The first days, common words slipped in from the radio chatter, words that sounded like hospital language or emergency management language. They didn't help. They made it feel like a problem with the procedure. It is not a problem with the procedure. The people I have seen from up here move like they do not trust their own balance. as if they were standing on a small boat and the floor keeps shifting under them. They move towards sound. I have tested this with care. A single tap of my boot on the steel catwalk will bring heads up below. I never do it more than once, because a mistake repeated becomes a pattern, and patterns are how you get found. I call them wanderers in my notes, not to soften anything, just because it is descriptive. I keep a log of sightings by time, number, and direction. On day 15, at 2:13 p.m., 2 wanderers, adult male and adult female, approached along the old access trail from the south where it crosses a small drainage. On day 21, at 11:37 a.m., 1 wanderer, adult male in a torn work jacket, stood motionless below the ladder for a full hour and then drifted east through the birches without a sound. On day 23 at 5:22 p.m., 4 wanderers, mixed ages, moved north along the ridge and did not deviate when a branch cracked under one's foot. On day 32 at 7:10 a.m., I observed fresh deer sign and a small group of turkeys near the old skid road. The turkeys strutted and fed, and the wanderers kept to the shadow of the pines as if they knew the open ground meant they could be seen. The page where I wrote day 32 looks better than the rest, because for an hour, watching turkeys, I remembered the reason I took this job. I ration water by the book. There's a plastic barrel lashed to the corner of the catwalk that catches rain through a clean gutter. I skim it with a mesh screen I made from an old tent door. I gravity feed into a hanging bag with a ceramic filter element that I flush every few days. I boil a pot in the morning for drinking bottles and another at night for cleaning. When rain holds off, I haul water from a spring down the slope in a 5-gallon container, climbing carefully so I do not put any weight where my right knee complains. I have visible routines that someone on the ground could notice if they watched long enough, so I change them every week. The hour I send the bucket down on the rope for supplies I leave cooling on the catwalk. The hour I turn on the small radio, the hour I write on the wall. It's not that anyone is watching. It's that I have learned to plan as if someone is. The tower's ladder is the one thing that makes me believe I can hold this position if I have to. It is a single run of welded steel bolted into the corner legs of the tower. There is no staircase, no second ladder, no way to scramble up except an open climb. If I pull up the bottom section, 2 rungs I cut free with a hacksaw on day 4 and spliced to hang on a short chain, the lowest reachable rung is above a person's head. If someone tries, the metal sings and I hear it. The trapdoor entrance to the cab has a sliding bolt I set with a padlock at night. I keep a climbing harness and a length of static rope coiled by the window. If the ladder is ever blocked from below, I can rig an emergency descent from the catwalk and slide to the ground with a friction descender that I have practiced with twice when I could risk the noise of the rope against the corner leg. My hands blistered the first time. The blisters healed and left tougher skin. When I write that I have 3 weeks of canned food left, I am not guessing. I counted cans on day 17 and again on day 41. There are 12 cans of pinto beans, 8 of chickpeas, 6 of black beans, 4 of corn, 3 of green beans, 9 of diced tomatoes, 7 of peaches, 4 of pineapple, 2 of fruit cocktail, 2 jars of peanut butter, 1 bag of rice sealed in a plastic tote with a package of moisture absorber, and a small bottle of multivitamins that I am taking every other day. The stove uses the small propane canisters that you twist on and off. I have 18 left. The math is not complicated if I keep my meals to 1 hot dish and 1 cold. Hunger is a steady sound now, like wind around the corner of the cab. You get used to wind. You get used to hunger. You do not get careless about either. I have a field pack packed at all times in case I need to descend and move. It is not heavy enough to slow me more than it saves me. A 2-liter water bladder, a hard bottle, the first aid kit, a headlamp with spare batteries, a small pot with lid, a steel cup, a collapsible filter, a lighter and steel, a roll of tape, a multi-tool, a small hatchet, a length of cord, a tarp, a set of base layers, wool socks, a pair of light work gloves, a brimmed cap, a poncho, and a bright panel cut from an orange vest that I can tie to a pole if I need to mark my position or call to someone at a distance without shouting. In the side pocket I have a paper map, a compass I won in a trivia night fundraiser for the local volunteer fire department, and a small notebook. I have a handheld radio programmed with the common channels for weather, local crews, and the few ham repeaters I could reach from the ridge. I am not licensed for the ham repeaters. I do not think the people who run those repeaters care anymore. Every few nights I climb out onto the catwalk after dark and sit with my back against the wall, knees up, scanning. It is not the safest practice. The risk of dropping something increases when you are tired. But there are things you see at night that you miss during the day, like moving points of light down near the reservoir, or the faint glow of a cook fire in a low draw when someone is careless enough to set up where smoke sinks and catches. On day 36 at 9:41 p.m., I saw a light near the boat launch 2 miles east. It blinked twice, slow, then again. Then again. It could have been a lantern handled by someone who wanted to be seen without broadcasting a steady glow. I noted the time and direction. I did not go. The conference of the unnamed voices in my head, field instructor, ranger I respect, my own mother, voted against it. Today, I found fresh tracks on the access trail below. This is the first time since day 20 that I have seen prints as clear. The night rain slicked the top layer of soil, and the footfalls left clean edges in the packed duff where the trail cuts through the laurel. Human tracks, boot tread, not the soft heel-dragging indentation the wanderers leave. Someone came from the south, paused at the clearing, and stepped back toward the tree line. The stride is right for a person who's moving with caution. The toe marks show stops and checks, and then, near the base of the ladder, 2 prints stood close together and mud smeared up the first rung. I cleaned that rung on day 7 when a raccoon tested it in the night and I found small, muddy paw marks. What I saw this morning is from a human hand. At 11:02 a.m., I heard the metal ring once. You do not mistake the sound. Steel rang against steel, a bright note that cuts through the damp hush under the canopy. I moved to the window from muscle memory. I did not stand in the center. I slid, low, near the wall. It is not dramatic. It is a thing you do to break your outline. The trapdoor was bolted and the padlock was set. I crouched and shifted the small table so I could lie with my eye at the crack. A movement, then another. A hand appeared on the rung below the trap. The skin was clean. The nails were short and normal. The fingers had a small scar across the top knuckle. A second hand followed. Then the face. A woman in her late 20s, hair pulled tight in a simple tie. A pale line of chappe around the mouth. Eyes doing the same work mine were. Checking angles for movement. Scanning for motion that meant fear or intent. She froze when she saw the padlock and looked up. I could have spoken. I didn't. She looked left and right, then lowered herself carefully, and I heard the metal ring quietly 3 times as she moved down. I tracked her through the leaves. The laurel around the clearing is low and thick, and if you kneel, you can vanish in it. She did not kneel. She stayed upright, back to the trees, scanning and stepping like she'd done this before. She didn't run. She moved with purpose but not speed, past the foot of the hill, up onto the faint turnout where a truck might have parked in better years, and then back into the trees. I watched the trail for 10 minutes and saw no one else. I waited the same time again and saw nothing. I did not chase. I have learned to respect the small mercy of unmade choices. But when I climbed out to the catwalk to check the water barrel, I left a small bundle by the trapdoor and tied it to the lowest hinge bolt with paracord. In the bundle, I put a can of chickpeas with a pull tab, a small bottle of water, and a single-use packet of antiseptic wipes. It is not charity. It is a radio call made without a radio. At 1:17 p.m., the metal sang again. I was ready this time, not with my eye at the crack, but with my hands open and a folded paper I slid towards the center of the trapdoor from the side. The note said only, "If you are still you, tap twice." I heard a steady breath, then 2 taps with a pause between. I moved the bolt, lifted the trap an inch with my fingers still on the underside so I could control the swing. I saw the same eyes and the tight pull of skin at the corner from the dry air. The woman said, very quietly, "I'm not sick." I nodded and said in the same tone, "Come up, one at a time. Put your hands where I can see them. I don't need anything from you. I have a question." She glanced down and then back to me. "I'm alone," she said. "If there is anyone else, I don't know them." Her name is Lena. She carries a pack that a forester would recognize and boots that have seen real trail miles. She worked at an environmental lab in Kane, the kind that does water quality testing and soil sampling for streams that run red after spring melt. When the first closures hit, the lab shut. She went to her apartment. The power went off on the second day and the landlord was not around. She packed and walked with the idea that the forest would be a place where buildings were not the only walls. She had avoided people using the rules she made for herself. If someone wanted her attention, she didn't give it. If someone didn't want her attention, she didn't give it. It is a simple rule and a hard one to follow consistently, and when she said it, I believed she had kept it. I asked the question I had decided to ask if I ever let a person through the trap door. "Have you heard a steady voice on the radio within the last week?" She shook her head. "Only bursts," she said. "Like someone keying a mic to see if anyone is still there. I heard a weather broadcast 2 nights ago." I nodded because so had I. The NOAA weather loop that still said a flood advisory ended at a time and date that made no sense now. I gave her water and a can of peaches. She asked if I wanted anything in return and I said no, and then she offered something that wasn't a thing you can hold. "I can sit out there and watch while you sleep," she said quietly, nodding toward the catwalk. "I can wake you if anything moves at the base." I looked at her and did not say yes. I did not say no either. It is harder to be alone when you are no longer alone. The mind builds its little ways of keeping quiet when there is no other voice to bump against. With Lena here, breathing on the other side of the cab, I heard my own habits scrape. I opened the footlocker and set the rules I had made in my head on the table without dressing them up. Number 1, no shouting from the catwalk. Number 2, the trapdoor stays bolted unless 2 of us are inside the room. Number 3, no open flames on the catwalk. Number 4, no light discipline failures after dusk. Headlamps must be shaded if the reflective surfaces below could catch. Number 5, no repetitive patterns within a week. If you fetch water at 8 a.m. today, fetch at 1 p.m. tomorrow. If you cook midday today, cook in the evening tomorrow. Number 6, if either of us doesn't feel well, we isolate ourselves immediately on separate sides of the cab and communicate only by written notes slid across the floor. Lana read the page and nodded once. No argument, no nervous laugh, just a small, visible settling, the way a person looks when rules make a problem feel containable. I slept 2 hours while Lena sat cross-legged by the eastern window, eyes on the ladder and the clearing below. When I woke, she handed me a folded page from her own notebook. On it, she had drawn a map of the woods to the south and had marked with small circles the places where she had seen wanderers in the last 2 days. The circles lay where I would have put them. Edge of laurel, low ground where sound catches, near a large rock that acts like a heat battery when the afternoon drops cool. "You have a good eye," I said, and she shrugged and said, "When you walk alone, you either learn or you stop walking." We built a schedule that first afternoon as if we were co-workers coming in at the start of summer. We divided day and night into watches, 2 hours at a time, overlapping for 30 minutes at each change so the person going off watch could pass notes and the person taking watch could ask questions. We drilled a quiet alarm plan that used 3 taps on the trapdoor for stop, 4 for come look, and 5 for ready to move. We set a rule for meals. Eat together in daylight so we could do all the noise-making once. We set a rule for signals. No flashlights used as beacons. No mirrors to throw glints, no whistles. The only signal we allowed was a cloth panel hung for 10 minutes at sunrise on days when there had been no movement all night. The panel was for anyone out there like us who might be watching with binos and deciding whether to approach or slide past and try their luck elsewhere. On day 50, at 7:03 a.m., we got proof that rules made the difference between hazard and catastrophe. A gray pickup rolled into the old turnout below while the first light was still angled through the white pines. It moved slow, almost too slow, like someone was willing it forward 1 yard at a time. The truck stopped with the hood pointed south. 2 people got out. One was a man in his 40s with a beard grown without a plan and a sleep crease pressed into his cheek. The other was a girl about 12, hair in 2 braids, wearing a jacket that had Panthers on the back in blue felt letters. They stood in the open for a count of 4 heartbeats too long. I counted them. Then they did something right. The man raised both hands, fingers spread, and turned in a slow circle. His voice came up strong but steady enough not to broadcast too far. "We are looking for height," he called. "We have not brought trouble." I raised my binoculars and found his eyes. I held them there long enough for him to see that he had been seen. Then I set the glasses down and went to the trap door. Lena stood by the window watching the edges. I slid the note I had used before through the crack and waited. The man nodded like he understood the language of papers and bolts and ladders. He tapped twice with the same spacing Lena had used. I opened, carefully, just enough to look down. Up close, he looked like someone who had spent a life outdoors doing practical work. Line cook, mechanic, maybe a groundskeeper. He said, "My name is Evan. This is my daughter, Maya. We slept in the truck last night by the old pipeline cut. We saw your cloth." He did not ask for entry. He asked for permission to park the truck under the pines and sit at the base. "We can keep watch from below," he said. "We can take turns sleeping against the tire. We don't expect to come up. We just need a place where we are not seen from every side." Trust is not a switch. It is a plank you add to a bridge 1 board at a time. We told them to park with the driver's side away from the ladder, so if a door swung open in a hurry, it would not bang the rungs. We told them to kill the interior lights if the doors opened after dusk. We told them to keep food sealed unless they were eating it, and to throw scraps in a sealed bag that we would haul up later and carry to a distant drop, so no raccoon learned a schedule under the tower. Evan nodded to every instruction and did them cleanly, with a visible relief like someone who had been waiting for rules as much as we had. Maya looked up at us with curiosity like a person watching from a balcony at a play where they have just arrived midway through. That afternoon, wind rose from the southwest, a steady push against the cab that made the guy bolts tick in their holes. Wind is a friend from up here because it steals scent and buries small sounds in branch noise. The wind carried a smell of damp soil and early fall leaves. With the wind came trouble in the form of 3 figures cutting across the old skid road. I saw them first because my watch overlapped Lena's, and we were both leaning forward with our chins on the windowsill in that quiet way you do when you and another person have settled into the same rhythm. I tapped 3 times and then 4, the combination we used for stop what you are doing and come to see. Below, Evan shifted his weight and moved his daughter into the shadow of the truck like a parent who has practiced this without wanting to. The 3 approached with a speed I had not seen in days. Not a sprint, but a purposeful, unwavering line toward the ladder, as if the steel itself called. They wore ordinary clothes, the kind you see in gas stations: jeans, a hoodie, a flannel shirt. Their faces were slack and their eyes fixed. They made no noise beyond footfalls. The wind carried those away. We could have shouted. We did not. We ran what we had drilled. Lena moved to the trap and set her foot on the bolt. I shifted to the corner and picked up the length of nylon webbing I had rigged through a pulley fixed to a structural plate. On the end of the webbing is a small sack full of loose washers and nuts. It is our noise trap. One pull dumps the bag over the edge on the far side of the tower, 30 feet away from the ladder, and the steel rain makes a sound that carries just far enough without traveling a mile. I pulled once. The bag flipped and spilled. The 3 turned all at once, as if a string had tugged their chins. They drifted toward the clatter. Evan did not move. Maya did not breathe loud enough for us to hear. We watched and waited and watched some more. They wandered away in the direction of the falling washers. We let them go without testing our luck by repeating the sound. Repetition builds expectation. Expectation invites company. After they disappeared between the trunks, Evan looked up and held one hand flat at chest height, palm facing us. We had not agreed on that signal. Sometimes the right signal is the one that needs no agreement. It said, "Thank you," and "We will hold here, and keep your head." That night, we ate together for the first time. Together, in this case, meant 2 in the cab and 2 under the pines, all 4 of us silent for a minute before anyone took a bite, because there's a kind of quiet gratitude that feels right before you lift food to your mouth in a world that has made food complicated. Evan opened a can of beef stew and split it with Maya. They ate it cold without comment. I passed them a tin cup with hot water because sometimes heat is the difference between a meal and a memory of a meal. Lena and I ate rice and a can of tomatoes. I poured the tomato liquid into the rice to make it feel like an actual dish. The simple act of seasoning is gone now that salt is measured and guarded, but heat and acid are seasoning in themselves. After dark, while wind pressed the tower and the pickup ticked as its engine cooled, we traded information by voice in short lines, simple and practical, without storytelling. Evan had come from near Sheffield. He had worked maintenance at a small manufacturing plant that cut steel parts for larger machines. He had a habit of changing the oil on the exact day the manual recommended, and this habit became a more general habit that showed up when the world got disorganized. When in doubt, follow a system that has served you. His daughter knew the names of constellations not because she had been taught them as myth, but because she had liked to sit outside and learn the progress of things that moved consistently in a world where other things did not. She named the Big Dipper out loud for us that night. It felt less like naming a shape and more like setting a clock. On day 52, we had our first conversation about leaving. We had avoided it as long as we could because leaving changes a place into something you can no longer hold, even if you return. But food was declining. Fuel for the stove was finite, and winter would make the tower a wind instrument. I had worked a winter tower once out west, and the sound of a good gust through guy lines can rattle your fillings. We spread the map and listed goals like a project plan. Goal 1, find a resupply that didn't require a long exposure in open ground. Goal 2, find a way to shelter at lower elevation when the first hard freeze hit. Goal 3, keep the option to return. The ranger station 2 miles south held promise. I had the keys because my supervisor had asked me to check the station for a leaking roof before all this. The station is a square cinder block building with a single garage bay, a small office, and a storage room where they keep drip torches, rakes for fire lines, shovels, signs, and bird boxes for volunteer projects. It has a cistern fed by a small catchment on the roof and a gravity toilet that still works so long as the tank holds a few dozen gallons. The program truck had gone with the crew during the first week and never came back. What might still be inside were things we could use: more fuel canisters, a box of MREs with the tiny heaters inside, paper goods, safety gear. The risk was approach and entry. The path ran along open ground for a stretch and then moved through laurel that could hide a person at full arm's distance. We drew a route with attention to small breaks in the canopy, where aerial search would have seen a glint if anyone was still flying. No one was flying as far as we could tell, but it costs nothing to plan as if the eye in the sky still exists. We would move in pairs. Lena and me first, Evan and Maya following at a set time lag that kept us within a whistle's reach if we carried whistles, which we did not. Instead, we set a rule. If either pair had to stop, the other pair would stop when they reached the last agreed point and would wait 10 minutes. If no one appeared, they would return to the tower. The clock would govern us if we let it. We went at first light on day 53. The air was dead still, and the ground held last night's damp. Leaves held droplets like a signal that no one had brushed them. We moved along the old access, stepping where the ground held like it had held others. The field practice I had spent years running in my head without needing. How to use the uneven spacing of trees to block profile. How to let your breathing slow before you step into a place where your foot will touch dry twigs, came back as muscle, not thought. We stopped twice and listened as if listening could be converted into distance. At the laurel stand, we took the longer way around to avoid the tight channel, where you could not see a person until you were nearly on top of them. The detour cost us minutes and bought us calm. The ranger station stood quiet. The flag was gone from the pole. The grass at the edge of the gravel had pushed into the lot without anyone to trim it. The door was still locked. I used the key like it was an old familiar tool because it was. I opened slow. Buildings smell like what they are, and when you know the smell of a place, you can tell if it has changed. The station smelled like oil, old paper, a hint of pine cleaner, and the faint, cool smell of block walls. It did not smell like a place where someone had lived recently. We moved in with a light sweep. Not because we expected a person, but because expecting nothing makes you careless. We found what we needed and more. A case of water in plastic, 8 MREs, a box of propane canisters with 6 still sealed, a bag of rice like mine but heavier, a pair of new work gloves, and, in the back on a shelf labeled Public Outreach, 2 boxes of granola bars that had been bought for a trail event that would not happen. We brought it back in 2 trips, using the pack frames leaned in the corner for trail days, and all the while the clock kept us honest. On our second trip, a detail that would have slipped by if I had been alone made both of us stop. Tread marks in the gravel that were not ours and not Evan's pickup. The pattern was deeper, the kind a heavy truck leaves. The direction indicated a vehicle had backed to the garage and nosed around like a dog. It had happened before the last rain. We marked it on the map with a small X and an arrow and put a note. Heavier vehicle passed here. Unknown when. Use caution. That note would save us on day 56. On day 54, we reorganized the cab and the ground. We strung a second noise line with a bag of metal bits toward the north side. We set a zip line from the catwalk to a tree 30 feet away so that if someone ever blocked the ladder from below, we could leave without lowering a rope straight down where hands could grab it. The line was an old, static rope doubled across with a pulley and a backup prusik knot. We tested it with packs, then with one of us attached while the other belayed from inside. It was not a fun ride. It was, however, a safe ride. As we worked, Maya asked quiet questions from the ground and I answered them calm, because the calm with which you tie a knot is more important than the knot itself when a child is watching. On day 55, wind brought voices. They were not distinct, not handheld to ear communications, but the sound of people talking and not caring who heard it. The kind of talk that floats from a campsite after dark. The kind of talk that draws the wrong ears. It came from the direction of the boat launch. We counted the distance and the obstacles to get there. A ridge to cross, a creek to wade, a stretch of open road. We decided not to go. You can't go to every voice. The choice felt wrong and right at once. That is how you know a choice is probably the correct one. On day 56, just after 3 p.m., the heavy truck we had guessed at from the tread marks arrived in person. It was not military. It was not a government fleet vehicle. It was a commercial flatbed with a winch tower, the kind used to haul cars from ditches. It rolled up the old access until the branches scraped its roof. It stopped at the turnout and idled there like a large animal breathing through a sore throat. 2 men climbed down. One had a ball cap pulled low. The other wore safety glasses like the kind you keep in a glove box. They did not scan like Evan had. They did not pause before stepping into the open. They looked up right away and found the ladder and the cab. One of them raised a hand in a lazy wave that was not a wave so much as a test to see if anyone would wave back. We did not. They talked to each other in the open, voices easy, about how the tower would make a good lookout and how it would be a shame if no one had the sense to use it. The shape of their conversation made it clear that their plan was to use it themselves. They circled the base and tested the lower rungs of the ladder and found the chain I had hung with the 2 removed rungs. One of them laughed and said, "Someone thinks they're clever." Then they stood back, both at once, and looked up like carpenters judging whether they had brought the right length ladder from the truck. They had not. They had rope, however, and a hook, and the muscle to throw. Evan and Maya were on the far side of the truck, out of sight. I had a view of the men through the gap between 2 hemlocks where the needles droop like curtains. Lena moved to the trapdoor and set her foot hard on the bolt. I took the radio and set it to a frequency I had not used, one of the ham repeaters that had fallen silent weeks ago. I keyed the mic and said in a flat voice, "If anyone hears this and is within 2 miles of the old tower on the North Ridge, we would welcome a distraction to the south." It was not a plan that relied on hope. It was a plan that pushed chance into the field. The man with the hook threw his line high and it clanked against a rung 3 meters up. The hook slid and fell. He threw again. He was patient. He would have found purchase if we allowed him to practice. I nodded to Lana and she pulled the noise line. The bag of washers fell on the north side and made its fountain of small pings. The men looked toward it and looked back and laughed because, of course, a person up a tower would try to distract. Their faces were loose and sure. Confidence is a resource. It is also a weakness if you lean on it without bracing your feet. Evan did something then that surprised me, and that I would have scolded anyone else for attempting. He moved the pickup forward 6 feet, slow, and then he stepped onto the bumper and banged once with a wrench on the hood. The sound carried. Not far, far enough. From the stand of Laurel to the west, a figure turned, then another. They moved toward the noise. Evan banged once more and then stopped. He did not make a pattern. He made 2 points on a map and then put the pen away. The wanderers drifted toward the louder thing and away from the ladder. The 2 men at the base went quiet. You cannot keep bravado on your face while you calculate. They calculated and decided. The hook went back into the truck. The men went with it. The flatbed rolled away with the sound of gravel under heavy tires. The wanderers reached the stump where the truck had been and stood like stones. We did not relax. We held posture for a long time. Maya stood so still under the pines that a squirrel ran down the trunk behind her and stopped, unsure if she was a person or a strange new part of the tree. When we finally let shoulders drop, I went to the map and put a square around the old access intersection and wrote, "Tow truck, 2 men, rope and hook. Retreated when noise introduced wanderers. We would not count on a repeat. We would build a second layer." We took the time, precious, costly time, to rig a barricade under the ladder out of deadfall and wire, not to stop a determined climb but to make it audible in a way we could not be tricked out of hearing. That night, I could not sleep. The tension did not feel like fear. It felt like what you get when a team you don't trust walks the job site. You keep your boots on and one eye on the door. I took my turn on watch early and let Lena sleep an extra hour because her hands had shook after we finished. At 1:10 a.m., I heard a sky sound that I had not heard since day 6. A small aircraft engine, low, steady, like someone had tuned a lawnmower and put wings on it. I went out to the catwalk, careful with the headlamp's shield, and scanned the sky. A fixed-wing plane passed from east to west, its navigation lights steady. It did not bank. It did not search. It flew a line like it had a place to go. I raised the handheld radio and scanned the aircraft VHF band and heard only intermittent static. I made a note. Aircraft at 1:10 a.m. on day 56. East to west. Light steady, no call heard. I do not know why that note made me feel stronger. Maybe because it meant something in the world still moved along a planned path. By day 57, we had to decide whether to stay through the week or pivot to the ranger station as a base and use the tower only as a post. The case for the station was simple. More shelter at ground level, less exposure to wind, and the ability to cook without regard for drafts. The case against was also simple. Visibility. A truck could roll up to a building. A tower is a narrow target with a single point of entry. We ran a small experiment to gather data. We left the panel on the tower at dawn like we always did if it had been a quiet night, but we left a second panel on a pole near the ranger station clearing for just 10 minutes, then took it away. Within an hour, 2 wanderers drifted toward the station clearing and stood as if waiting for a bus. They stood for a long time. We watched them from the tree line and did not move. The experiment answered a question. Visibility draws attention. The ranger station would need camouflage if we were to use it. We cut branches and leaned them against the building in a way that broke the straight lines and softened the corners. We dragged a downed log to the edge of the lot to give a reason for anyone on the road to slow without pulling in. We hung a tarp under the eaves to mask light at night. We rehearsed our approach. We rehearsed our exit. We set a cache in the woods 200 yards away where we would stash a third of our supplies in case someone surprised us, and we had to finish a meal with the clothes on our backs and nothing else. It took 2 days to make it look like no one used the place. That is the trick of good camouflage. The eye trusts age. You have to teach your makeshift to look like it has been sitting there a long time. On day 59, we were ready enough that we could risk sleeping a night at the station. We kept watches like before. We set a rule that whoever slept did so with boots on and a jacket within reach. It is not comfortable. Comfort isn't the measure. The night went without incident. The morning came with a small surprise that delivered a gift we didn't know we needed. A note under a rock on the back step. The handwriting was blocky and careful. It said, "If you are listening on 2 meters, try 146.520 at 8 p.m. 2 meters is the amateur band where people often keep a calling channel. The note could have been a trap. It could have been years old, even if it looked new. It could have been someone's habit that persisted after the habit got them into trouble. We argued it like professionals. We set the radio and listened at 8 p.m. The voice on 146.520 at 8 p.m. was a man in his 60s by the sound of it. He did not give call signs. He said, "If anyone is in the Allegheny corridor between the reservoir and the river, we're going to try a move tomorrow." Not promising anything, just trying to keep a door open. He did not say where. He did not say who. He said, "If you are close enough to hear this, you are close enough to use your head. Speak only if you must." We didn't key the mic. We didn't say we heard. We just listened. And when he signed off the frequency, we looked at each other, and I saw the same thing in Lena's face that I felt in mine. A door you didn't expect in a wall you thought was solid. On day 60, at 10 a.m., we split positions for the first time since Evan and Maya arrived. Lena and I took the tower. Evan and Maya took the station. The plan was simple. A person at each location would listen at the top of the hour on 146.520. If the voice gave a cue that matched one of 3 words we had agreed would be potential waypoints, we would consider a move. The words were bridge, dam, and marina. Those were the options that made sense within our circle. At 12 p.m., the voice said, "We'll try the marina first. If that's a no-go, we head to the bridge. If that's no-go, we try the dam midday tomorrow." He spoke with the confidence of someone who once ran a crew, and who hadn't yet discovered that he didn't. It didn't sound reckless. It sounded like the kind of confidence that has kept small towns from failing because someone kept showing up with a tool bag. We did not go to the marina. It was too far, and the approach ran along roadways that might have more eyes than we could handle. We set our focus on the bridge as a potential place to watch, the one that crosses the river south of the reservoir, where the flow narrows and the road bends. We reached a small overlook by late afternoon and settled into the shadow under a hemlock to watch. What we saw at 5:27 p.m. taught us a rule we would keep. People who plan to help often arrive with enough noise to hinder. A group of 8 approached the bridge on foot, carrying packs and talking just enough to let their own voices draw their attention. They did not see 3 wanderers in the shadow of the abutment. They did not see 2 more drift from the cover of a parked truck. It was not a disaster. It was a tangle. The group corrected fast and moved across without anyone falling. But it was a signal that even good intentions can stretch thin when the ground itself becomes a tripwire. We returned to the tower that night in a silence that was not heavy so much as concentrated. We had learned that we are not alone in planning. We had also learned that being together multiplies your risk unless you add discipline stronger than the sum of your parts. We shuffled our plans and continued to listen at 8 p.m. The voice said the dam would be next. The dam worried me. It is a piece of infrastructure that whistles for attention in a world where attention is currency. But it also offered the possibility of a person who could engineer a solution to something we could not. I wrote in the margin of my notes, "If at the dam, maintain distance. Watch for patterns." On day 61, we went to a high point with a view toward the dam and watched with brown pine needles under our knees. At 12:40 p.m., we saw a small group at the overlook near the visitor area. The voice from the radio matched one of the men by cadence and the way he used his hands to direct others. He did not touch anyone. He did not crowd. He pointed and let people choose. They looked at panels and gauges like they had worked there once, or at least knew what to look for. We could not hear their words. We saw their shoulders ease a fraction when someone turned a valve and someone else nodded. Later, a light, small and steady, glowed in a place that lights had not glowed in days. It could have been a test. It could have been a sign. It looked like a small piece of order in a field that had been overrun with weeds. We did not walk in. We left a note where a cautious person would find it, under a rock full in the view of a security camera that might or might not still be recording. The note said, "We are at height in the North Ridge Tower when we are not sheltering at the small station 2 miles south. If you wish to coordinate to avoid drawing attention to both places at once, we listen at 8 p.m. on 146.520. We keep lights low. We can haul water. We can trade watch hours. No names needed." It was the most we could offer without inviting our own removal from the map. On day 62, we woke to frost. It traced the edge of the catwalk like a reminder that the season would not wait for us to make better plans. The barrel on the corner had a skin of ice. I broke it with the long spoon I used to stir rice and scooped it out as if I were taking glass candy from a bowl. This is the point in a season when you change how you dress and how you think. You tuck layers into layers. You add a wool hat to your pocket so you don't forget to keep your ears. You adjust your water schedule because cold masks thirst. We turned part of our attention to heat that day. The tower offers no insulation worth speaking of. The station has a small wood stove intended for demonstration during workshops on camping skills. We moved it out of the corner and set a fire brick base because I once watched a ranger do it and remembered all the angles. We scrounged seasoned wood from a pile of trail maintenance offcuts and split them, which warmed us twice. We ran a test burn at dusk with the tarp hung to mask light and a person outside to check for glow. The stove drew well enough. It threw a modest heat that would turn dangerous if unmonitored, so we set a rule that no fire burns without 2 people awake and a clear 5-foot circle around it. Rules compound safety. They also cost time. We were willing to spend the time. The next morning, the frost was heavier and used the tarp to paint delicate outlines we did not have time to admire. We set ourselves to the work of staying ahead of cold and tried not to let the sound of geese moving south make us feel like the only animals that had failed to migrate. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.